This is workshop series organized by the Education Committee of Urantia Association International. And these sessions are recorded on video for future study purpose use. So we ask you to turn off your camera if you do not like your image being used for video records, and ask to speak off the record at any time when you do not want your say to be part of the videotape. In this way, your part will be cut out of the video during editing. Thank you very much. Well, let's begin then. Yeah, I would like to invite, if some of you want to say a prayer to begin the meeting. Who volunteers to pray?
Volunteer.
Excellent, Pato. Thank you very much.
Are you ready? Dearest Heavenly Father, I just want to say thank you for the gift of life, and thank you for the opportunity for us to come together, to study together, to learn together, and to motivate each other to be vehicles for your presence at this time, and to be of service to our brothers and sisters in our unique ways, using our unique talents. I want to say thank you to Christ, Michael, and our Mother Spirit. And I want to just hope and pray that we remain open vehicles of communication so that we can be in alignment and being in tune with the will of our celestial family, with the plans of our celestial family, according to the will of our Heavenly Father. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pato. Beautiful prayer. Hi, Mandy. How are you? Nice to see you again. Hey, Gilles. Nice to see you too.
Hello.
Hello. In our previous meetings, we have studied concepts about teachings about leadership on civilization, about the wise social, political, economic leadership, and that this wise leadership is necessary to the reorganization of the world, which requires spiritually regenerated, born of the spirit leaders. We also read that Jesus said regarding spiritual leadership that if someone wants to guide others into the kingdom, they must walk in the clear light of the living truth. To understand better the concept of living truth, we will study today the religious and spiritual experience. And say Jesus in Urantia Book, the spirit of truth is the spirit of living truth. Divine truth is a spirit discerned and living reality. Truth exists only in the high spiritual levels of the realization of divinity and the consciousness of communion with God. That static truth is dead truth. Living truth is dynamic and can enjoy only an experiential existence in the human mind. And religion, says the revelation also, religion is the God-knowing, exclusively spiritual experience of our soul, and God can be known only by the realities of experience. So, what experience? Is if Jesus founded the religion of personal experience in doing the will of God and serving the human brotherhood. Faith, human religious insight, can be surely struck only by revelation and can be surely elevated only by personal mortal experience with the spiritual adjusted presence of God, who is Spirit. The true spiritual development consists in the exhibition of a human personality motivated by love, activated by unselfish ministry, and dominated by the wholehearted worship of the perfection ideals of divinity. And spiritually are concepts from the Urantia Book, of course. Spiritually enhance the ability to discover beauty in things, recognize truth in meanings, and discover goodness in values. To understand better what means this living truth, in which the leader and teacher of the Urantia Book teachings, or the religion of Jesus, must walk in this living truth, let's study what is the experience of personal religion. I would like now to share my screen with you to see some quotes that I sent to you by email to reflect to your consideration. Says the Urantia Book, descriptive words of things beautiful cannot thrill like the sight thereof. I would like to share with you something very simple. It's a video.
Birthday, dear Daddy.
Yeah, okay.
Happy birthday to you.
How old are you now? Oh, there's something for you to open.
He's posing.
And what?
He thinks he knows what it is.
If I was going to guess,
Don't guess.
You're going to guess wrong.
You're gonna guess wrong.
really?
Yeah.
All right, one more time.
Happy birthday, baby, from all of us.
Happy birthday.
What is this?
Put them on.
Come on.
Put them on.
The sunglasses.
How does it look?
Oh, that's weird.
Look at the balloons.
Can you see with our eyes now, baby?
What colors you see?
Those?
You see colors now?
Oh, the trees are neat.
Now you have rose-colored lenses, baby. Now you see with our eyes. Do you like the balloons?
Oh,
Turn around. What about the flowers in the house?
Oh my goodness.
doesn't look like mud.
It looks like brighter mud.
Oh, who did that?
All of us. I've been wanting to do it for years, but Paula did it.
so weird.
I bet it does.
But I haven't seen it forever. The trees look so... They don't even look real. Seriously, they look 3D.
That one's changing colors up there.
Oh yeah, orange.
You can see that.
Oh, man. Dorothy.
It is like the Wizard of Oz, isn't it?
Man.
It's definitely like the Wizard of Oz when you go black and white and all of a sudden you see color. You're not in Kansas anymore, baby.
I would like to invite some of you who want a volunteer to read, and after that we can reflect about the meanings.
I'll be glad to read, Jenny.
Thank you, Margie. Please.
Religion is functional in the human mind and has been realized in experience prior to its appearance in human consciousness. A child has been in existence about 9 months before it experiences birth. But the birth of religion is not sudden. It is rather a gradual emergence. Nevertheless, sooner or later, there is a birthday. You do not enter the kingdom of heaven unless you have been born again, born of the Spirit. Do you want me to continue, or do we want to stop on that one?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, keep going. Okay. Religion is the experiencing of divinity in the consciousness of a moral being of evolutionary origin. It represents true experience with eternal realities in time, the realization of spiritual satisfaction while yet in the flesh. When a moral being chooses to be unselfish when confronted by the urge to be selfish, that is primitive religious experience. No animal can make such a choice. Such a decision is both human and religious. It embraces the fact of God consciousness and exhibits the impulse of social service, the bias of the brotherhood of man. When mind chooses the basis of the brotherhood of man. When mind chooses a right moral judgment by an act of the free will, such a decision constitutes a religious experience. Belief may not be able to resist doubt and withstand fear, but faith is always triumphant over doubting. For faith is both positive and living. The positive always has the advantage over the negative. Truth over error, experience over theory, spiritual realities over the isolated facts of time and space. The convincing evidence of his spiritual certainty, the convincing evidence of this spiritual certainty consists in the social fruits of the Spirit, which such believers, faithers yield as a result of this genuine spiritual experience. Said Jesus, "If you love your fellows as I have loved you, then shall all men know that you are my disciples."
Thank you, Margie. May you stop share my screen. Now I would like to know your thoughts, your understandings about those teachings.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
From my observations of these teachings, it seems as though service always seems to follow as a natural result of one's connection with spirit. A person who has spiritual experiences seems to naturally want to love their fellows and be of service because of that connection, or maybe without even realizing, but it's just a natural result that spiritual experience leads to service and love.
Thank you, Pater. Anyone else?
I do have one more thing to say while the other guys think about it. The video you showed was a great demonstration for me of spiritual experience, because the guy who put the glasses on, he was lost for words, you know? And even though he started getting his president, he had a very confident attitude. Once he put those glasses on, he was blown away. He was just stunned. And I think that is a part of the spiritual experiences I've had where I'm blown away. It's very hard for me to even explain them, and not being able to really explain them properly because it's a personal experience. But when it happens, it's mind-blowing, and it's something that you know is beyond your human capacity or capability, that you know there is some divine connection. And it's just beautiful and makes you feel lost for words. So that video was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Pato. To me, it was exactly what it seems to me. Nothing can, it says in the Urantia Book also, nothing in the universe can take the place of real experience. And that man had passed all his life seeing certain colors and listening about the colors that we are seeing are not real, but it was only a theory to him until the day he put his glasses and he saw. And that is what happens with the being born with the spirit. There's something different. It's a profound vision of a new reality. Old world becomes new, and that's it. When I saw that video, I think immediately it's like to be born with the spirit. Thank you. Yes, Ed.
Yeah, well, I had a similar experience. I'd been reading the Urantia Book for 3 years, and I was going through Northern California, and I stopped at this park, and there was this one gentleman sitting there, and he told me, he says, have you been saved? You know, and here I've been reading the Jesus papers, and I understood my spiritual awakening pretty well, you know. He says, have you accepted Jesus as your personal savior? And I looked at him and I says, well, I really hadn't. He says, well, do you want to do this? And I says, yeah, I want to do this. And he did it. And there was a calm that came over me that I did it, that I couldn't believe. And here's this gentleman sitting on a park bench, and I had this great revelation in my backpack, and he enlightened me to an unbelievable position, you know. And I just wanted to add that to let you know that these things happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else?
I was going to ask Bob.
Yes, please, Bob. Okay.
I'll say something here for just a second. The part that we read about how it's a slow emergence, but there is a day, and when I read that for the first time in the Urantia book, you know, I started to begin to wonder when that, because my personal religious experience has not been one. It's been my personal religion has been very evolutionary. I have had very few. I guess my most revelatory thing is when I began to feel an experience I had about worship, when I began to understand and have that experience of what real true worship was. Now, to me, that was like a bolt. Okay, that was very. But when I look back over my life and I look at, you know, emergence, because I grew up in a conservative religious background and I was reared in that, but my, you know, I was guided very well by people that loved me. And so when I look at that, you know, that experience, what brought me to the realization of who Jesus was in my life, I was actually pretty young. I mean, I was maybe like preteen to teen age, and not to say that I understood. I certainly didn't understand it on an adult level, but you know, I knew that I loved him, and I knew that God loved me. I mean, and that was the, you know, the big thing. And the tradition that I grew up in, when you come to that realization and you acknowledge it within your religious community, then you're baptized. And I was. And but for me, baptism was a very you know, it was a very personal thing. I wasn't thinking about my parents or my family or my church or anything. For me, even at that young age, it was a very, you know, and so when the, you know, the minister, you know, laid me under the water and he brought me back up, you know, I have to say that put me on an entirely different road, but it was a, you know, a slow and a gradual maturing into a more mature faith. But you know, the thing I always go back with is that when I'm feel like I can be of help to other people, I remember those people that loved me so much, that guided me. You know, they were doing me a tremendous amount of service. And I'm very grateful to them. And in fact, as I actually buried one yesterday, 96 years old, wonderful life, you know, and she was a tremendous service to me. And so, you know, knowing what I know out of the Urantia book and my experience with these people, I hope I can do as well for the people that I meet that these people did for me, because I would not be who I am without them. And so I try hard to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Margie. Beautiful experience. Anyone else want to share? Yes, Bob.
Okay, I got it. Am I on?
Yes.
Everybody hear me? Okay. I'm reminded, as we talk about this, I'm reminded what I read the first time in the Urantia book. I've read it many, many times. But Jesus was speaking to his apostles, and he said something that really caught my attention. He said, "You cannot join me in my kingdom unless you're reborn again." And there was one apostle, you may remember, that spoke quite up. Doubting Thomas questioned Jesus strongly. He said, "Jesus, we honor and respect you and believe in you, but how can a man come out of his mother again and be born again?" And Jesus had a real problem sometimes trying to get the apostles to understand certain things. He had to find a lot of different ways to do it. Well, as I began to study that, I was reminded that at 12 years old in the Baptist church, I became officially what you call a Christian or born again. And I'll never forget that. It was kind of an emotional thing for me because in this Baptist church, we had a fire and brimstone preacher that backed the hearse right up to your face that really scared the pea wadding out of you. But later on, I found out it meant something different. And to live again in the spiritual world is completely different than what I thought it was. And religion, I heard a definition one time that I might share with you. What does the word religion mean? In this case, they said to realign on your life. And I thought that I might share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. One thing that is very interesting to me to reflect about, when the Revelator is talking about the born of religion, it seems that the born of religion, like the baby, the unborn baby within the mother, is forming, right? It's growing, but it has not formed yet. And it seems that the Revelator is making a comparison, is the word? Like the born of the religion is like the conception of the baby. Do you agree with that? Yes. And the baby is growing until the day it is born. And the born of the baby is similar to the born of the spirit. So, and the Revelator says, religion already exists during this period of, so to say, pregnancy, spiritual pregnancy, right? Yes. And yes. One question, I have meditated about this text many times, and I would like to know, what do you understand in this? This born of religion, it is the born of faith? What do you think? Yes, March.
I'm not quite sure I understand your question, but in other words, what does it mean to be reborn? I mean, what's actually, you know, I think a lot of that may come out of your own personal religious, you know, tradition. Both Bob and I share, I think, a very mutual kind of that. I did not grow up in a fire and brimstone church, though. But the difference before and after my baptism, for me internally, was very, very different. Before, you know, people were, I think, putting a lot of time and energy, you know, into me, and I was soaking up a lot of the experience, which was, a lot of it was social, you know, social interaction with people, and you know, like all children and young adult, you're trying to decide what your moral compass is, what you consider to be right, what you consider to be wrong, all those sort of things. But the change between before and after, in other words, before birth and after birth, was that I internalized this goodness of Jesus, that he, and it wasn't so much a question about saving, because, you know, I really hadn't done anything terribly bad to be safe from. I mean, I was 11 or 12 years old. But it was this thing about relationship. It was this thing of understanding that I had a personal relationship with my father and with his son. And you know, it was that I sort of bloomed, in essence, in me. It would, you know, if you look at faith, I mean, I had you know, I can remember having faith in God from being very, very small. I mean, I used to ask really, really hard questions when I was like 6 or 7 years old. In Sunday school, I'd ask questions like, you know, I never did believe in a concept of hell. And I brought that very pointedly when I was about 6 years old in a Sunday school class. I just said, if God is love, then how can there be hell? And a lot of people tried to talk me around that one, but they never could get me over that hump as far as they were concerned, you know. And so I had, you know, I had faith, but it was this like real personal relationship that, you know, my faith may have been a kernel before, but it seriously bloomed at that point and became much more you know, active. And so though I was still soaking up all this wonderful goodness that was around me from these people, that I began to notice how people, you know, lived their lives. In other words, in terms of their beliefs, you know, did they really follow through, you know, with things? And there were times where, you know, people had said one thing and they did another. And that made me become even more discerning and more discriminating, mm-hmm. you know. And but it was you know, so for me, that's kind of what it was. It was this acknowledgement of a very personal relationship. Does that help you? I mean, does that kind of answer the question? I'm not sure I did or not.
Yes, I think so. It is something like it's. My question was focused in the knowledge and also in the experience, because yes. This is something that we can understand when we live it.
I am. Is it Jeannie? Yeah. When you say acknowledgement and experience, I would put that also with belief and faith. And I think that your original question regarding is faith the ingredient that leads to the spiritual birth? I would agree with that belief takes us on the journey, you know, but once we accept it as a reality, that is what changes it from being intellectual to becoming a real living force in our lives.
Beautiful words. That's it. In my understanding, I have tried to understand this concept, and I know it is not easy to have a clear, have it clear in our minds. But I agree with you, Pato, in this process of growing of faith. But it seems to me that when religion born is when we accept God as a reality. But it takes time to be born of the Spirit. It is a process of accepting God, accepting the will of God, loving God, recognize fully Him as our Father. And then we are born of the Spirit. This is, in my experience, what happens.
Mm-hmm. And even when we grow in the spirit, even when we are born in the spirit, we are babies
Yes.
in the spirit.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
we're only just born.
Yes.
So then we have to become spiritually mature, which is another journey for us to enter fully into the kingdom.
Yes. 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 We cannot remain at the door. We need to progress.
You have to
Grow.
grow.
Exactly. Beautiful.
I think I'd like to say something to that.
Yes.
That whole matter of we're born, but we're still babies. In my own background, I was brought up in the Roman Catholic denomination. We had a large family, and I went through public schools, and but I had an evolutionary tool shop, sort of, if I can use that expression, that was not conducive to what, I don't know, living faith. I went through all of the stages, sort of, but I still had a lot of pride. I still had a lot of vanity. I still had a lot of self-will. When these things were getting in the way of relationships with people, and I think I see it in many others also. When I found the Urantia book at age 22 or age 23 or something, I did experience remarkable mellowing out and a distinct ease in the tensions I was feeling about the universe. And I'm sure that it leavened and worked on some of these nasty evolutionary tools that I had, which weren't working. Tools like pride and vanity and self-will, all of the classics that set up the human problem of living. So this is one of the things that, the Urantia, I read further in that one paper that mentions this metaphor of birth. It talks about stormy births also, and it doesn't say that they're infrequent or rare. It says that it's really quite a large percentage of the population that has to go through some serious work after they first have the sun rise on their horizon. So I don't know. I'm not going to continue on this line right now, but I wanted to just say that lots of work in growing up out of an original position of dawning truth. Like I said before, I think maybe last week, it was terrific to finally anchor my belief in God, and to have a revelation that went to the system level and to the constellation level and to the super universe level and all the way to paradise was astonishing. But that in itself, the positive effects of those kind of intellectual realizations don't exactly do all of the work of growth. I still, like I think I mentioned before, I still had patterns of unsuccessful relationship and dealing with people and bosses and teachers. I'd like to hear, well, we don't need to, but it would be great if people also mentioned some of the hardships, some of the difficulties that come from this kind of need to do this work with these evolutionary tools that aren't sharp, that aren't doing the work that the revelation wants to see happen. I don't know. I'm having trouble articulating this morning, but I'll turn it over back to the group. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. I would like to say John, we all have the same difficulties, and the revelation of Jesus have gave us in the revelation the tools to grow, to be strong, to transform our how can I say this our lack of peace, our lack of spirituality, etc., in this inner communion with the Father. I think the inner communion in worship is the source of anything we need to feed our soul, transform our mind, to be like Jesus, because when you manifest the fruit of the Spirit, we are being like Jesus. And we to do that, we need this continuous communion, because it is a spiritual experience. We will see now I would like to invite you, after asking if anyone wants to say something more about this. We have some quotes to read now that helps us to understand more about religious and spiritual experience. This is important to understand. Anyone else want to say something before we continue reading? Yes, yes.
Yeah, so a couple of points. The first point is about the living truth aspect and the mind. I think I've already shared that with the group, so I won't go into the details. But coming from a background of atheist parents, I was naturally atheist. But I was very inquisitive, so I asked myself a lot of questions. And I ended up being in a situation at one point where I got the concept of, I was wondering what the purpose of life was. And all of a sudden, in that specific day, I was like, it became obvious to me, like a specific instance, that the purpose of life was to become perfect and that it would take eternity. To me, this was a momentous moment of spiritual clarity, as far as I can look back. And for the next year or two, you would have asked me if I believed in God. I would have said no way. So there is that to me, that experience makes the difference between spiritual clarity and the mental actual concept that you can have in your mind. That's one aspect. Now, to get back to what John was saying, a couple of points is regarding hardship. So after that, I was 15 when this happened, and I had made the decision then, since it was obvious, to become perfect then. And a lot of things were going on in my mind in terms of what it meant and so on and so forth. But later in years, got married, got kids, and bad luck, speaking of bad relationships, got into a divorce. And that divorce was not the friendly divorce kind of divorce. I was really thrown in the mud, accused of a lot of bad things. And the purpose was simple, was for money, right? To get, you get the child custody, you get the money that goes with it. So that's very obvious what was happening. I was Urantia Book reader, I had this experience of faith and blah, 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 all that. But let me tell you, that was hard. That was a hard situation to be. I saw my daughter suffering. I saw my daughter coming from being joyful, playing the violin and stopping everything. I mean, this has been very, very, very hard on me. And when you feel so powerless like that, you have I had some, I was like, and, because it's like, this is so obvious, you got to do this. Just man, this is so obvious. And so that was very, very hard. And so I had, let me tell you, I had very, very bad nights of sleep at that point. And frankly, and shame on me for that, I went even as far wishing the death of my coming ex-wife, right? That was really, really bad. So I was so bad, and I knew it was not right in my mind to think these kind of things and to feel the way I felt. I knew it. I knew enough. So I was like, but I couldn't. It was so hard. So one of the things that I did is to reach out to the Urantia community. And I was specifically looking for a man who had gone through a similar experience. What was I looking for that? Because I needed someone who could understand me, and who could understand me by experience. Not someone who was going to tell me, yeah, be loving and all that, blah, blah, blah. right? Not also the you know, where God loves you and all that. Well, yeah, I kind of know it, but you know, it's all nice, you know, very nice. My God is suffering and I'm being thrown into the mud. So and I was lucky enough. I went through one of those mailing lists, and one gentleman responded, and I was in touch with him. Unfortunately, I lost his contact information. But you know, instead of saying, "Oh, my poor little Gilles," and blah blah blah, it's so hard, so tough, he said, "Well, man, you know what? Your wife is probably behaving the way she does because she's scared. She's scared." And you got to handle that. You got to deal with that. And you can, you know, not sleep and whatever. You know, at the end of the day, the more you're going to fight, the more money you're going to lose, and the more your daughter is going to suffer. That's the end of it. There is no need to think more about it. That's plain fact. You know, that's the way it goes, right? So now you got to go deal with that woman who is scared. It didn't mean that everything that she did was perfect besides a fear, but you know, getting a kick in the butt from someone who nicely, he was not harsh, he was very, very nice and loving, he was not judgmental, but that was extremely helpful. So I'm telling this experience since John was requesting an experience of hardship, and to me, what this tells me is the brotherhood and how helpful it is. It's great to have God love us and to love God, right? It's all great, and this is absolutely necessary, no question. But we need to have the love of our brother and the support, and the value of experience was extremely useful, because this guy had credibility because he had to go through what I was going through. So I couldn't say, well, just work, you know. No, he knew, and he went through it. So to me, and you know, I want to share those things because I think we can help each other. And the third point that I would like to bring, since I have right now I'm speaking, it's not too loud at home, is that John was also mentioning about like what he was saying, pride or things like that. One of the things that has held me back for a long time is, as I was thinking and I was evolving, you know, I had a sense comparing with others that something was going on in me that was not something I could share and with everyone, and not everyone would be receptive, and a sense of something a bit, you know, different, and frankly put, a bit special. And I was fighting that, because as this feeling, or this in my mind saying, oh well, you are a little bit special, you know, you're maybe a little bit smarter or a little bit more spiritual or whatever. You know, it's like, but then he was teasing my pride. Say, hey, you know, it's very tempting to say, yeah, now listen to me. And I hated this in me. I hated it. It was a true battle in me. Because on the other hand, I'm also I think I'm humble as well. So there was truly a conflict inside me. And I think, I don't know if I have fully resolved it, but what I think helped me to get over it, at least to a large extent, is actually Thanksgiving, and recognizing that as a personality, I'm ignorant, and I just don't know. And realizing that source of perfection that is in me, that we know as, you know, thought adjuster and spirit of truth and whatnot, without them, I was nothing. I was simply nothing. So, and what it boiled down to is, if I were to do something right or good, at the end of the day, it's not because of me, as the baby who grew up learned how to speak, and it's just because I was influenced. But granted that I did my work, I was requesting and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I don't know. And if you look at where we are going to the paradise. This is far away. I have no freaking idea how I'm going to get there. I just don't know. I'm ignorant. So realizing that, and then every time something good that came out of me somehow, I got into the understanding and the reflex of getting into Thanksgiving and saying, well, thank you, Father. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for being good. Thank you for inspiring me. And took away that conflict, at least as far as I could feel it. And as a result now, I feel more confident is not the right word, but more inclined or bolder in terms of talking about my spirituality, because now I feel like I can do it without being, without boasting about it, without being arrogant about it, because the good, you know, it's always thanks, Father, thanks for guiding me, and the good comes from you, right? And I need you to get to the next step, and then this is where we go into the prayer and the communion aspect. All right, well, I guess that's what I wanted to say about this topic for now.
Awesome. Awesome, Jazz.
Yes. Thank you very much. I invite you to continue reading. I will share my screen and ask some volunteers to read who wants to read.
I'll read if nobody else is volunteering.
Thank you, Pato.
I'm starting from section 1, from the top. Jeannie?
Yes, please.
Okay. The divine spirit makes contact with mortal man, not by feelings or emotions, but in the realm of the highest and most spiritualized thinking. It is your thoughts, not your feelings, that lead you Godward. The divine nature may be perceived only with the eyes of the mind, but the mind that really discerns God, hears the indwelling adjuster, is the pure mind. Without holiness, no man may see the Lord. All such inner and spiritual communion is termed spiritual insight. Such religious experiences result from the impress made upon the mind of man by the combined operations of the adjuster and the spirit of truth, as they function amid and upon the ideas, ideals, insights, and spirit strivings of the evolving sons and daughters of God. Religion lives and prospers, then, not by sight and feeling, but rather by faith and insight. It consists not in the discovery of new facts or in the finding of a unique experience, but rather in the discovery of new and spiritual meanings in facts already well known to mankind. The highest religious experience is not dependent on prior acts of belief, tradition, and authority. Neither is religion the offspring of sublime feelings and purely mystical emotions. It is rather a profoundly deep and actual experience of spiritual communion with the spirit influences resident within the human mind. And as far as such an experience is definable in terms of psychology, it is simply the experience of experiencing the reality of believing in God as the reality of such a purely personal experience. Faith unites moral insight with conscientious discriminations of values, and the pre-existent evolutionary sense of duty completes the ancestry of true religion. The experience of religion eventually results in the certain consciousness of God and in the undoubted assurance of the survival of the believing personality.
Thank you, Pato. How do you describe a spiritualized thinking? What do you think it is spiritualized thinking? because this is the way God made contact with us. So, what do you think? Yes, Bob.
I've got something on that. I think, you know, the readings sometimes play down the emotional side of religion, but they're not trying to really do away with it. They're just saying that if you're really talking about contact with the spirit realities within, you need to get onto the other side of the emotion. And it's really, I think, that our thoughts are the things that kind of give birth to our emotions. And so the Holy Spirit, I think, knows this about us, and that's, you know, this name thought adjuster, which I am kind of ambivalent about sometimes. I thought, gee, that's tough that they called it that, because human beings don't like the idea that they might need some adjusting in their thinking. But I've come more and more to see the wisdom of calling it that, because adjusted thinking is really the key to getting past some of our pride, some of our self-will, and our vanity. We need to adjust the whole structure that brings those things forth in us. So I think that's why the emphasis is on the thought, not. I mean, it's not like, well, I'm just going to think a wonderful thing and then the adjuster will be with me. It's more like I need to rethink a lot of things. I need to rethink some of the things I'm so sure about in order to start generating more of a real, genuine spiritual love. Because the things that get in the way of our brotherhood, a lot of times they have to do with incorrect conclusions about people and about things. Anyway, so getting at the thought and going after the thought is one way of circumventing the emotion. And then, of course, the emotion comes, emotion's fine. It comes out of us. It's really part of our response to spiritual reality. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be joyous and loving and all that. But as far as the adjuster is concerned, the spiritual forces want to get behind the emotion so that they can create a new, higher level of emotional response, I think. Or not. But that's it for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you, John. Bob? Yes.
Okay, I'm on. You hear
Yes.
me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
In reference to spirituality of the mind, I'm reminded of a Urantia conference I attended about 5 years ago in Kansas City. I met a most interesting man. He was about 70 years old and really good health, good looking, very tall, about 6'4". And listening, he was teaching one of the classes there, and listening to his class, I had an opportunity to visit with him afterward. And I was astounded at what he told me. He went to college to get a bachelor's degree in religious studies, and he got in trouble because he discovered the Urantia Book and mentioned it in some of his work, and they almost didn't let him graduate. Then he went on and got his MS in religious studies, and then he went on and got a PhD. Now, he shared with me he went to Vietnam, and he was a colonel, and his duty was astounding. He was responsible for all the medical evacuation helicopter crews and birds in all of Vietnam, an astounding responsibility. And in visiting with him, I asked him what his PhD was in, and he astounded me because I didn't know you could even get that. He said, it's in the psychology of religion. And I thought, how interesting. Yet he was a very strong believer in Urantia. And we discussed something that I want to bring up and you all can think about. Why do each one of us believe in Urantia? We all will have a different reason, probably. But I went on to read the book, The Psychology of Religion. and it really helped me understand the Urantia book a little bit better. We each have our own opinions, our own movement of exactly what clicked to make us accept the teachings of the Urantia book. You can approach that sharing with somebody else in 360 degrees. And when I have the opportunity to share with, I'm sorry, to share with somebody, I always try to find out something about them, get an idea where their belief might be before I introduce it, because there are so many ways to introduce the subject that Urantia offers. If you know a little bit about them, you can pull something from that direction. And I'm reminded of a book you might want to think about, How to Talk to Anybody About Anything, by a very national, well-known news commentator. And it helped me know how to talk to people about the Urantia. Anyway, the spiritual mind is a very, very interesting subject, and we all have our different experiences and different opinions, but we try to share it with everybody. I just wanted to pass that on to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, Pato?
My experience with spiritized thinking is normally after I pray, and then I go into a meditation and worship. And when I'm in that zone, my thoughts are higher than my normal daily thinking. I think when I get into that zone, I'm not so concerned about my human needs, you know, my immediate needs. And I start to see things more from a long-term viewpoint. And that's when I usually get inspired to change my diet, to exercise more, to be of more service, to do things a little better. It's normally during that moment in my thinking process when it's quiet and peaceful and I'm really leaning on listening more than speaking, you know? And that's when I usually get the most inspired.
Thank you, Pato. Beautiful, beautiful. Anyone else have something? Yes, Ed.
Yeah, I wanted to make a couple points about Giles' statements. We need the love of our brothers. That was really important. I wanted to let him know that that really hit home there. Also, we said something else. People are afraid, you know. I can understand that situation, that his wife was afraid. And I use that just about in any situation we're in when we're in the position to ask to create a situation for other people. We can understand if we use little statements like that, we can alleviate a lot of their suffering. And on the final subject, we must possess cosmic stamina. So sometimes when we feel sorry for ourselves, wait a minute, don't I have the stamina to overcome these fears and everything else, you know? This is personal. This is not talking about other situations. That's just talking about me. But I wanted to especially thank Giles for that. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Yes, James?
Well, thank you, Ed, for the nice comments. On the topic about spiritualized thinking, to me, there is a moment before anything of what Pedro was talking about is of thinking. Actually, is the opposite of stopping thinking, of doing meditation or anything like that, is actually very active thinking. Whatever problem I'm trying to deal with, like if I take the example I was relating earlier about when I had this moment of, what's the purpose of life? It's been the result of several years of thinking along the same line, but on that particular day, I was really pushing really hard. I said, what am I doing here? What am I doing? I didn't expect an answer. I was atheist. I wasn't looking in a book. I wasn't talking to someone, but I was inside myself saying, what is it? But what's the purpose? And what am I doing here? And why? And then after the end of that life, then what's left? What is it? What? So I was pushing and pushing and pushing inside myself. And there was a moment of insight, something that was completely the opposite of what was still in my mind in terms of trying to express it. But there was a moment of insight. So there was a divergence between my desire and some moment of insight and what was happening in my mind. And I have experienced that many, many times where there is a moment, first, not a moment, several hours of intense thinking, and then I get tired, and then I relax. And then this is where I go into that more prayer, communion, more active prayer these days, since I'm more aware of what it is. And then at some point, I feel that my thinking is, it's like, I think, it's like hypothesis thinking, option 1, option B, option C, right? A, B, C. And then I lean towards B. I don't know why, but I lean towards B as I relax and as I, so to me, that's what it is you think hard, and then through those, when you try to dig really deep into yourself, you get some kind of an insight you cannot explain that gears towards something, more of an option than the other that you were thinking of, and then here's evolution.
Thank you, Gibbs. Anyone else want to share? In the meantime, do you think something to share? It seems to me that the word spiritualized means that it is a thought transformed by the Spirit, because everything is spiritual comes from the Father. It's obvious, right? I know I am saying obvious things, but it's just reasoning. In the measure in what we come close to God, in the measure in what we become attuned with the Spirit is working within our mind, is transforming us, is making us like Himself. So, to me, spiritualized thinking is the transforming of the Spirit, the transformation within our mind, and we begin to see with the eyes of the Spirit, and we begin to think as the Father thinks. We begin to become like the Father. And then our thinking is spiritual. To me, this is the way, in the measure of our spiritualization, our Father, God includes Spirit of Truth, the Adjuster, and Holy Spirit, right? God can contact us because we are being like Him, and survival is identification with God. So if you are identifying yourself with the Father, with God, we are being like Him, and we are thinking like Him, right? This is an analysis that I am doing right now because I have no idea. Your reasonings, your thinking is helping me to understand. I have take a little for each one of you that was expressing yourselves. And I would like to ask you one more question, because this is one thing that many of you native English-speaking people, let me told you something that happens to us that speak Spanish or any other language in the world, you are reading the book in the original language. You are so privileged. You have no idea of how lucky you are, because we, the rest of the world,
yes,
except those who speak perfect English, which is I am not of those people. I am learning English. I'm looking hard to speak better English.
Yes.
When you read the Urantia book, you have the capacity to understand what the Revelator said. We are, in the other language of the world, we are reading the translator ideas about what. Sometimes the idea in the translation is right, and sometimes the translator introduces his own ideas. Many people in the world is reading the mind of the translator.
My experience,
you know, but
I was working with some of the translation in the Korean language, and some of the concepts, they have changed the concepts.
Yes.
Because the translator did not understand the concept in English.
Exactly.
So he translated it to his opinion.
Yes, that's it. That is happening. So when we read, for example, one example, when you read seraphim, you know that they are feminine, right? Seraphim are feminine. Well, in Spanish and Portuguese, seraphim was translated in masculine gender. We didn't know, I didn't know that seraphim was feminine until I read the book in English. I become aware of that when I read the book in English. So now, why I am telling you this? I have two questions to you, English native speaker, native speaking English. One, what do you understand when you read pure mind? What means to you?
For me, pure mind means to be righteous, to be living a clean life, a guilt-free life, where you are living in harmony with the will of God.
Yes, yes. It is my understanding too. If someone else has something to share about this concept, this is important because we have, as I said, this difficult understanding what exactly the concept means in English. John, do you want to say something?
More to do with pure mind too. I take a hint from what Jesus taught in the Beatitudes. The pure in heart will see God. In that sense, purity was the ability to see the best in people. It's sort of like Jeannie, you said something about thinking with God. We really have a chance. To try to do that when we look to the best in our neighbor and even in the person that we perceive to be not so friendly. We look past the garbage, and we look towards the divine within and all of the potential that the person has. We see the best in people. That's one. Purity means that the mind is not distracted or colored by negative emotion and things like that. Perhaps that helps me anyway to dwell on the beatitude of Jesus with regard to the word pure.
Thank you, John. Yes, Ed?
was just going to mention that when we're doing our Father's will is when we have our pure mind. And to do that 24 hours a day takes a lot of work. Anyway, that's my concept of pure mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
And I think it has also to do with unbroken communion. You know, when you are constantly discussing everything you're at throughout the day with your adjuster. And I think that takes faith as well. When you know that your adjuster is a real entity that lives within you, you know, when it's not just belief, but when it's faith, and that becomes a daily reality that you are conversing with a spirit reality that lives within you, it changes the way you think, it changes the way you behave, it changes the way you do certain things, because you are not doing it alone. You're doing it in the presence of God, with God as your partner, your daily partner. And I think that really dictates the choices you make.
Thank you. Excellent. Beautiful concept. I love it.
You know, there's also there's a teaching in the early papers that God strikes no personal stance toward sin. This is a hard one for me to get into the thinking of some of my evangelical friends who are sort of wound up in the idea that God punishes sin and that he gets upset or offended. But this is something very godlike that we can practice, and that is not taking a personal stance towards sin. In other words, keeping the personal stuff going in the direction of the sinner, the person. It's a huge teaching. I think it's in the 5th paper or something. I'm not sure exactly, but this idea that God does not strike a personal stance toward sin or evil, and he's not agonizing or offended, but he's working in and with the whole thing to bring it into a more pure place.
Hey, John? John?
Yeah.
John. I just wanted to remind you that in the Urantia Book, Jesus says that God loathes iniquity.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The Urantia Book said, Jesus says in the Urantia Book that God loathes iniquity.
Okay. Did you recognize the other thing that I was mentioning about in the early part where it says he strikes no personal stance towards sin? Is that I could have to look that up if people are drawing a blank there.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay, then yeah, what you've added is also pretty cool. I don't remember the exact place where that is where you found that though. Did you say loves iniquity?
He says loathe, L-O-A-T-H.
Oh, L-O-A-T-H-E-S?
Yes.
Okay, now we need a translator for the English. We need a dictionary because
the word love means...
I always defer to the early papers when we come to a conflict, but that's an interesting problem. And the whole problem of being a teacher, that has to be addressed. So yes. Do you have a page number for the loathing?
Jesus makes a great stance against evil and iniquity, you know?
Well, see, I think that, if I remember correctly, what is it? I mean, I'm having trouble with my train of thought. I think I'll pass for a second if anybody else wants to get in there.
Okay.
Yes.
And Jesus said that he's relentless. His words are, I am relentless against sin.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so when we are talking about sin, iniquity, and all those things, we are talking about the deep motive of what's in our hearts, and which touches. I think it goes to the spiritual level in the sense that it's the motive at the spiritual level, and then the mind pattern is how you interpret and express and all that, and make plans, and then you go into action. So that's why it goes very deep. I just wanted to echo, I think it's about what Pato was saying about the communion and unbroken communion. Perhaps something relevant that, you know, you were saying, you know, like you talk to your father, but you know, you don't really hear him, you know, the way we hear each other. At least I don't. And I don't know if you have had that experience, but sometimes you wonder. I say, okay, well, you know, it's all nice that, but you know, what is really the will of the Father, and what the heck am I going to do here? So and it boils down to you know, what comes from this superconscious level of the thought adjuster and the spirit level versus our subconscious and being discernment. And in this process, you know, I've you know, talked to the Father, talked to the Spirit, and so I feel like, okay, am I like delusional or something? Talking to someone that I don't hear and I don't see, I don't you know, what's going on here? And fairly recently, instead of saying, you know, what do you think, or you know, or talking to as if I was talking to someone else, lately it has been transforming to now, what are we going to do about it? As opposed to what do you think, what is your will versus mine is, well, you know, my will is yours. I don't know what that is, but that's my will, because I know that I don't know, and I know that you are perfect. That's the faith part that comes in. But now, where am I going? I have no idea. I can make some plans in my jobs and all that, but where am I really deeply going from the spiritual standpoint? How do I transform these common events of life into a spiritual? That's what, you know, that's not my, you know, I can help, you know, but how can I help? But that's what you do, right? So how do we do that together? You know, and let's collaborate. And you know, and then I say, okay, well, I feel this, I have this trouble, you know, how can we resolve that?
Yes.
Inside. I'm not sure where it's going, but this is what's happened very recently. So
yes, that's the way. That is the way. That is the way.
Well, we shall see in a few years. If
yes. The Urantia book has a section about the alter ego. And it says, at first you talk to an imaginary friend, and eventually you actually have dialogue with your indwelling spirit. But you have to practice this dialogue. And you start by doubting yourself. You think, am I just making this up? But the more you do it, is the more it becomes a true reality.
I think I found, John, I found the quote that Pato was referring to, if you want me to read it to you. It's in paper 149, section 6, paragraph 11. You do well to be meek before God and self-controlled before men, but let your meekness be of spiritual origin and not self-deceptive display of a self-conscious sense of self-righteous superiority. The prophet spoke advisedly when he said, walk humbly with God, for while the Father in heaven is the infinite and the eternal, he also dwells with him who is of a contrite mind and a humble spirit. My Father disdains pride, loathes hypocrisy, and abhors iniquity. And it was to emphasize the value of sincerity and perfect trust in the loving support and faithful guidance of the Heavenly Father that I have so often referred to the little child as illustrative of the attitude of mind and the response of spirit, which are so essential to the entrance of mortal man into the spirit realities of the kingdom of heaven.
Attitude of mind and response of spirit.
Thank you, Marjorie, for finding that. Yeah. You know, there's another place where Jesus was saying that unless somebody hates his mother and his father and his sister, he can't follow me. But this word hate, which may be related to the word loathe, it's not an active sort of animosity. It's not it's not a condemning, judgmental sort of thing, but it's more of a stay away from sort of thing. It's like the Urantia Book points out that in Jesus' time, the Jews were very into family and into tradition, and sometimes to be a follower of Jesus would lead to the family disowning somebody or threatening to, and that a person actually, in order to follow Jesus, sometimes needed to turn away from his family in order to do this, because the family was refusing, to go along with the new teachings. So the word hatred, in our culture, it builds this, it has this emotional tinge to it, or tone, but I really think that in the Old Testament use of the word hatred and loathing, it's more of a passive sort of turning away. It's not a fire and brimstone sort of thing. But I'm still looking for my earlier quote in the first part of the book from the Divine Counselor. I like though where this is going, and it's just like Jeannie said about translations and different languages and word meanings. Urantia Book readers are really challenged with this whole problem if they start quoting the book like a Bible, which is what I was doing. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's a troublesome thing. It's a thing that requires long-term conversations with people, especially teachers, people that assume that whole responsibility of being a teacher or being a spreader of the book. Anyway, remember that when Jesus said that we have to hate our family in order to follow him, he didn't mean that we have to start throwing chairs around in the back of the house. Anyway, I'm still looking for my Divine Counselor quote.
I don't know if Jesus said we have to hate our family. I think he said, unless you are willing to forsake your family.
Yes, that was the meaning. That was the meaning, but the Bible was translated to use the word hate. It could be that the Urantia Book doesn't have the word hate in it at that particular point. But in the New Testament translations, it is, if you don't hate your father and your mother and your sister, you can't follow me. So that was a word that I had to unpack in order to actually teach the whole concept. And it does mean that what you said, Pato, rather than an active sort of animosity. See, this whole thing, animosity is a lot different than shunning, avoiding, and keeping away from dangerous emotions.
Alan Williams, was he going to say something? Or Mindy? Hi, by the way, guys.
We've got the original quote that John was talking about, and trying to compare those two. It's in paper 2 on page 41, and if y'all don't mind, I'll read it. God loves the sinner and hates the sin. Such a statement is true philosophically, but God is a transcendent personality, and persons can only love and hate other persons. Sin is not a person. God loves the sinner because he is a personal reality, potentially eternal. While towards sin, God strikes no personal attitude, for sin is not a spiritual reality. It is not personal. Therefore, does only the justice of God take cognizance of its existence. The love of God saves the sinner. The law of God destroys the sin. This attitude of the divine nature would apparently change if the sinner finally identified himself wholly with sin, just as the same mortal mind may also fully identify itself with the indwelling spirit adjuster. Such a sin-identified mortal would then become wholly unspiritual in nature, and therefore personally unreal, and would experience eventual extinction of being. Unreality, even incompleteness of creature nature, cannot exist forever in a progressively real and increasingly spiritual universe. To me, the fact that they used iniquity,
Marjorie, that's good. That's where I was thinking.
Iniquity in the later quote with Jesus, iniquity is that point of wholly identifying.
Yes.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. Awesome.
The other question I have to you regarding meanings in English. When you read Master Jesus, the concept of master in this Master Jesus, what means to you exactly? Or what is the concept of master? Because I have read in the Urantia Book, Master, Teacher, Jesus. So, what is?
Marjorie. Yes. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to leave at this point. I wanted to just thank everybody. I'll let you a note on the chat. And Jeannie, master is a great word and one that I just can't get into. But I will see you all next week. So thank you for being here for me. I feel like you're all here just for me. I'm being very selfish.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
And bless your search engine, too.
Thank you. Yes, but
To me, master just simply means that you have mastered the art of something. Like you got a master guitarist, you got a master pianist, you got a master in philosophy. It's somebody who has become totally proficient in whatever it is that they're doing. And in Jesus's case, he had mastered everything. Living, he had mastered living, the art of living. And I think that's why Rodin wrote about the art of living, because that's what he had mastered. And so that's what I get when I hear the term master. That he knows what he's doing.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
For me, to call Jesus master means to recognize his greatness. His greatness as a person. That he inspires me and makes me want to become a better person because of his example. And I could just imagine that the men of his times recognize him as not only being a strong man and a great mind, but being someone who really cared for their soul. Someone who really loved them. And I think that would make it very easy for somebody to recognize greatness in a person, but the love that comes from that person makes you want to almost worship them because of the amount of love that they give to you.
Thank you. So the word master would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who is great. He knows many things and is. It is not in the sense of teacher, right?
I think it also connotes that they were following him.
Hebrew word.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Someone you are willing to follow and be taught by.
Right.
Yes.
Teacher.
Someone you want to give your loyalty to.
I think the Hebrew word was probably rabbi. Anyway, the mastery. I was reading in the adolescent years of Jesus and seeing that you cannot hardly turn a page without seeing that he is trying to get his control of his mind and mastery of his emotions and mind. He went up the tree of the 7 psychic circles also before his baptism, and that's part of his mastery. But I believe rabbi was probably the word that was used at the time.
Yes.
I also remember where he was talking to the disciples and he said, "You call me master, I call you friend."
Yes.
So.
Yes.
He didn't think of himself as a master. He thought of himself more as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all.
Thank you, Ali. in Spanish was translated as teacher. Maestro is the word in Spanish to teacher. And sometimes when I am reading the Urantia book in English, I perceived that the concept of master has some connotation or some meaning that it's not teacher. It's more great concept.
It's greater. It's greater.
Exactly. Thank you very much for your help. It's very useful to me to understand the concept.
Mm.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite you to read 2 more paragraphs, and I ask you some volunteers, of course, who would like to read. Let me share my screen. Sorry, just 1 second. Yes, please, who want to read? Any volunteer?
Okay, it's Mindy. I'll read.
Okay, thank you, Mindy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mindy.
Okay, the essence of religion. Theology deals with the intellectual content of religion. Metaphysics, revelation, with the philosophic aspects. Religious experience is the spiritual content of religion. Notwithstanding the mythologic vagaries and the psychologic illusions of the intellectual content of religion, the metaphysical assumptions of error and the techniques of self-deception, the political distortions and the socioeconomic perversions of the philosophic content of religion, the spiritual experience of personal religion remains genuine and valid. Religion has to do with feeling, acting, and living, not merely with thinking. Thinking is more closely related to the material life and should be, in the main, but not altogether, dominated by reason and the facts of science, and in its non-material reaches toward the spirit realms by truth. No matter how illusory and erroneous one's theology, one's religion may be wholly genuine and everlastingly true. The full realization of the reality of mortal life consists in a progressive willingness to believe these assumptions of reason, wisdom, and faith. Such a life is one motivated by truth and dominated by love, and these are the ideals of objective cosmic reality whose existence cannot be materially demonstrated.
Thank you, Mindy. I stop share. Now, we saw in the previous reading that God made contacts with our mind through the more spiritualized thinking. And here the Revelator says, religion has to do with feeling, acting, and living, not merely with thinking. How do you understand these 2 concepts?
Because, is it okay?
Yes, yes, please.
Because this, what we just read, is talking about material thinking, which is just dealing with the material life.
Yes.
The first concept we read before had to do with spiritualizing the thinking. And even in this section that we just read, it says on the higher levels, on the spiritual levels, towards truth, you know? So there are 2 different levels. But when it says feeling, this feeling is also the feeling from spiritualized thinking. Because sometimes in a spiritualized thinking, you are not hearing words. You are just getting a feeling that this is the way to go forward. And that feeling and acting and living is what changes you from a material thinker to a spiritualized doer.
Such a beautiful explanation. Thank you, Pato. The one is the divine action in ourselves, right? And the other is our moving through God. And then, thank you, beautiful. I love what you say. Thank you. Someone else?
So well said, we are speechless.
Yeah, so beautiful, so beautiful. And thank you, because your explanation helped me very much to understand. I had a confusion about this. Beautiful, thank you very much. In the meantime, you think about these concepts. I have one more question to you. It says in the reading, in the paragraphs that we read recently, no matter how illusory and erroneous one theology is the philosophy of religion. It says, one's religion may be wholly genuine and everlastingly true. So, if is it so, if we have erroneous ideas, erroneous concepts, but one religion may be wholly genuine and everlastingly true, why we have divine revelation? If we, so to say, if we save our soul anyway, why we have revelation?
I think going back to Ed's story, Ed had the Urantia book in his backpack, but the person on the bench was living the spirit of truth. If that person on the bench got Ed's book, he would have the complete philosophy, theology, and then he would have even more power to do divine action, with even more clarity and more surety, you know? And for Ed had the revelation in his back. Now with that experience, if he follows that experience, then he becomes divine action with revelation, you know? So one without the other don't work. You know, a lot of people have the revelation, but they don't do service. They just have an intellectual gift from our celestial family that is not being acted on. And there are people who have wrong concepts, but they are allowing the spirit of truth to live in them and work through them. You know? So revelation is important because it allows us to have more clarity in our action.
Well, incidentally, he was teaching me, and it wasn't my position to become a teacher and overwhelm his teachings. So I was aware that I had the real truth, but somehow or another he showed me that it wasn't that really quite that real yet. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Pato. Anyone else want to share something about why you have revelation? If you are saving our soul, if faith saves our soul, what's the purpose? Pato already said it, but it's something more. Yes, John?
Yes, I've often thought about in my relations with church-going Christians. I realize, as I said last week, I think they have a saving faith. They are going probably to the mansion world, no doubt. And I often wonder, because they find the concepts of the Urantia book to be a little bit ornate, maybe too much, or too many gods or something. It's hard to work with them in that. But I feel that the world is full of people that are agnostic and atheists now, and sometimes I'm tempted to go in that direction as far as trying to break through. But then there's a whole other sort of wall or barrier. But it's quite a dilemma. I think that's partly what you were talking about, is that, why, if we're saved, for those that are saved, why do they need another revelation? Well, I do believe that Jesus Christ wants a new Christianity, if nothing else. But that is very threatening to Christians sometimes. It's a dilemma. Just wanted to say that these people are saved. Why don't we focus on the folks that are not? I mean, it's not easy, but I just wanted to interject that.
Thank you, John. Yes, Pat.
I just wanted to add, I think there is great spiritual power in truth. And I think that one of the things about the revelation, I think in paper 100 it says, spiritual growth is determined by spiritual communion with real spiritual forces. And I think revelation gives us clarity of vision and depth of spiritual receptivity. And going back again to what you were saying earlier about spiritualized thinking, what I wanted to add was spiritualized thinking is like an exchange of material thinking for higher thinking. And also, the more we allow spiritualized thinking to take place, is the more we gain spiritual receptivity. And that spiritual receptivity, what we receive, is almost like recognition of a higher level of thinking that is coming to us, that we are allowed to receive if we're in a position to receive it and recognize it through faith.
Excellent.
Without doubting it.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So I think revelation is very necessary for clarity of vision.
Yes.
Perspective.
Thank you. You blessed us today.
Thank you.